Well, warm welcome to the 60-second meeting of Soteria, a very select group today, possibly because we've all been a little bit disquieted by the change in times in different countries. But nevertheless, I think we're all keen to hear what Stead has to say about the other James Bond, and we're going to read something about the other James Bond, the first James Bond being James Bond, the author of The Birds of the West Indies. So over to you, Stead.
Yeah, hello everyone. Like most British people of my age, I grew up with the customary marking of public holidays by the showing of a James Bond film on television and the periodic discussion of whether the most recently selected actor was an appropriate avatar to incarnate this almost deified representative of the nation. Today, those of us, myself at least, who've never read a word of the novels will get the opportunity to taste a little of the original prose that gave birth to the cinematic phenomenon. And it's hoped enough to be able to feel the tension, which, according to Richard Benson in the nicely named James Bond Bedside Companion, culminated at the end of each chapter to propel the reader onto the next. Surely a mark of any successful thriller. The Bond series stands self-consciously in the lineage of Sapper, W.E. Johns, and John Buchan. Fleming, in addition, acknowledged Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, and Graham Greene as models for his writing. Broadly speaking, I think in style, expertise, and inclination, Ian Fleming seems to have resembled his creation, and the novels were informed by matters he had had some experience of. His father was a member of Parliament and the family was well connected. After schooling at Eton, where he excelled at athletics, he attended Sandhurst and 2 continental universities before working as a journalist. In 1939, he was recruited as the personal assistant to the director of British Naval Intelligence, which proved to be a very auspicious appointment. Returning to writing after the war, he began the series of what became a dozen Bond novels and 2 collection of short stories, beginning with Casino Royale in 1952.
So that was the first one.
Indeed, yeah. I hadn't known this, but he also published posthumously the very well-known children's book Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was turned into a film as well.
Rex Harrison.
I didn't know that. The literary reception has been reasonably positive, though not universally so. Paul Johnson, for example, in reviewing Dr. No, written in 1958, wrote, "Mr. Fleming has no literary skill. The construction of the book is chaotic and entire incidents and situations are inserted and then forgotten in a haphazard manner." And that seems to me sufficient reason for us to select that book to read, which lies midpoint in the series and may therefore perhaps be regarded as good a representative of the series as any other. So with that short introduction to a big subject, shall we begin reading Dr. No? Can we all sit? Shall I
Needs to be bigger for me.
Make it a little larger, yeah.
A bit larger, yeah. That should be all right. Yeah. That's
Okay. Well, I think ladies first. So,
okay.
Janine, perhaps you'd like to
hear you loud and clear.
So this is Dr. No. Sorry, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Punctually at 6 o'clock, the sun set with the last yellow flash behind the Blue Mountains. A wave of violet shadow poured down Richmond Road, and the crickets and tree frogs in the fine gardens began to zing and tinkle. Apart from the background noise of the insects, the wide, empty street was quiet. The wealthy owners of the big, withdrawn houses, the bank managers, company directors, and top civil servants had been home since 5 o'clock, and they would be discussing the day with their wives or taking a shower and changing their clothes. In a half an hour, the street would come to life again with the cocktail traffic. But now, this very superior half mile of Rich Road, as it was known to the tradesmen of Kensington, held
Kingston.
Kingston.
We're in Jamaica. We're in Jamaica.
Right.
Yeah, yes, right.
Held nothing but the suspense of an empty stage and the heavy perfume of night-scented jasmine. Richmond Road is the best road in all Jamaica. It is Jamaica's Park Avenue. It's Kensington Palace Gardens. It's Avenue de Yena. The best people live in its big old-fashioned houses, each in an acre or two of beautiful lawn set, too trimly, with the finest trees and flowers from the botanical gardens of Hope. The long straight road is cool and quiet and withdrawn from the hot, vulgar sprawl of Kingston, where its residents earn their money. And on the other side of the T intersection, at its top, lie the grounds of the King's House, where the governor and commander-in-chief of Jamaica lives with his family. In Jamaica, no road could have a finer ending. On the eastern corner of the top intersection stands number 1 Richmond Road, a substantial 2-story house with broad, painted verandas running around both floors. From the road, a gravel path leads up to the pillared entrance through wide lawns marked out with tennis courts, on which this evening, on all evenings, the sprinklers are at work. This mansion is the social mecca of Kingston. It is Queen's Club, which for 50 years has boasted the power and frequency of its black balls. Interesting. Such stubborn retreats will not long survive in modern Jamaica. One day, Queen's Club will have its windows smashed and perhaps be burned to the ground. But for the time being, it is a useful place to find a subtropical island, well run, well staffed, and with the finest cuisine and cellar in the Caribbean.
Just an interjection. Michael, what was your understanding of black balls there?
I'm guessing I mean, there are 2 possibilities, but my first one would be that people are dressed in black. The other possibility would be blackballing.
Yeah,
but I have no idea.
Yeah, yes, those are 2 possibilities. My thought was the frequency of its black balls, that's to say voting not to admit a member.
But that would be a little bit
but yeah, it could be black
maybe
balls.
It's a play, but I would have thought that would be more likely blackballing rather than black balls.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he quite likes the ambiguity of it, that it can sort of suggest the 2 things.
Well,
maybe I don't know, but yeah. Janine, do you know what blackballing is?
Well, oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry for that interjection.
Thought perhaps maybe for black people to come.
No.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah.
Only
black people invited to the ball.
Black proms here, so maybe.
Yeah, I think not. But anyway, sorry. Okay.
Right, at that time of day, on most evenings of the year, you would find the same 4 motor cars standing in the road outside the club. They were the cars belonging to the High Bridge game that assembled punctually at 5 and played until around midnight. You could almost set your watch by these cars. They belonged, reading from the order in which they now stood against the curb, interesting spelling, to the brigadier in command of the Caribbean Defense Force, to Kingston's leading criminal lawyer, and to the mathematics professor from the Kingston University. At the tail of the line stood the black suburban Alpine of Commander John Strangeways. Strangeways or Strangways?
Strange ways, mate. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Mm.
RN retired, regional control officer for the Caribbean, or less discreetly, the local representative of the British Secret Service. Oh.
Mm.
Just before 6:15, the silence of the Richmond Road was softly broken. 3 blind beggars came round the corner of an intersection and moved down the pavement toward the 4 cars. They were Tigros, Chinese
No.
Negroes, bulky men, but bowed as they shuffled along, tapping at the curb with their white sticks. They walked in file. The first man, who wore blue glasses and could presumably see better than the others, walked in front holding a tin cup against the crook of the stick of his left hand. The right hand of the second man rested on his shoulder, and the right hand of the third on the shoulder of the second. The eyes of the second and third men were shut. The 3 men were dressed in rags and wore dirty jippa-jappa baseball caps with long peaks. They said nothing, and no noise came from them except the soft tapping of their sticks as they came slowly down the shadowed pavement toward the group of cars. The 3 blind men would not have been incongruous in Kingston, where there are many diseased people on the streets, but in this rich, quiet, empty street they made an unpleasant impression, and it was odd that they should be called Chinese Negroes. This is not a common mixture of bloods.
Mm.
In the card room, the sunburned hand reached out into the green pool of the center table and gathered up the 4 cards. There was a quiet snap as the trick went to join the rest. 100 honors, said Strangeways, and 90 below. He looked at his watch and stood up. Back in 20 minutes. Your deal, Bill. Order some drinks, usual for me. Don't bother to cook a hand for me while I'm gone. I always spot them. Bill Templar, the brigadier, laughed shortly. He pinched the bell by his side and ranked the cards in towards him. Or raked the cards towards you. Okay. He said, hurry back, blast you. You always let the cards go cold just as your partner's in the money. Strangeways was already out the door. The 3 men sat back resignedly in their chairs. The colored steward came in, and they ordered drinks for themselves and a whiskey and water for Strangeways. There was this maddening interruption every evening at 6:15, about halfway through their second rubber. At this time precisely, even if they were in the middle of a hand, Strangeways had to go to his office, quotes, and make a call, quote. It was a damn nuisance. But Strangeways was a vital part of their 4, and they put up with it. It was never explained what the call was, and no one asked. Strangeways' job was hush, and that was that. He was rarely away for more than 20 minutes, and it was understood that he paid for his absence with a round of drinks. The drinks came, and the 3 men began to talk racing.
Do you want to Michael? Do you want to take over?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. In fact, this was the most important moment in Strangeways' day. The time of his duty radio contact with the powerful transmitter on the roof of the building in Regent's Park that is the headquarters of the Secret Service. Every day at 18:30 local time, unless he gave warning the day before that he would not be on the air, when he had business on one of the other islands in his territory, for instance, or was seriously ill, he would transmit his daily report and receive his orders. If he failed to come on the air precisely at 6:30, there would be a second call, the blue call at 7, and finally the red call at 7:30. After this, if his transmitter remained silent, it was emergency, and Section 3, his controlling authority in London, would urgently get on the job of finding out what had happened to him. Even a blue call means a bad mark for an agent unless his reasons in writing are unanswerable. London's radio schedules around the world are desperately tight, and their minute disruption by even one extra call is a dangerous nuisance. Strangways had never suffered the ignominy of a blue call, let alone a red, and was as certain as could be that he never would do so. Every evening at precisely 6:15, he left Queen's Club, got into his car, and drove for 10 minutes up into the foothills of the Blue Mountains to his neat bungalow with the fabulous view over Kingston Harbour. At 6:25, he walked through the hall to the office at the back. He unlocked the door and locked it again behind him. Miss Trueblood, who passed as his secretary, but was in fact his number 2 and a former chief officer WRNS, would already be sitting in front of the dials inside the dummy filing cabinet. She would have the earphones on and would be making first contact, tapping out his call sign, WXN, on 14 megacycles. There would be a shorthand pad on her elegant knees. Strangways would drop into the chair beside her and pick up the other pair of headphones, and at exactly 6:28, he would take over from her and wait for the sudden hollowness in the other that meant that WWW in London was coming in to acknowledge. It was an iron routine. Strangways was a man of iron routine. Unfortunately, strict patterns of behavior can be deadly if they are read by an enemy.
Ooh.
Strangways, a tall, lean man with a black patch over the right eye and the sort of aquiline good looks you associate with the bridge of a destroyer, walked quickly across the mahogany panelled hallway of Queen's Club and pushed through the light mosquito-wired doors and ran down the 3 steps to the path. There was nothing very much on his mind except the sensual pleasure of the clean, fresh evening air and the memory of the finesse that had given him his 3 spades. There was this case, of course, the case he was working on, a curious and complicated affair that M had rather nonchalantly tossed over the air at him 2 weeks earlier, but it was going well. A chance lead into the Chinese community had paid off. Some odd angles had come to light, for the present the merest shadows of angles, but if they gelled, thought Strangways as he strode down the gravel path and into Richmond Road, he might find himself involved in something very odd indeed. Strangways shrugged his shoulders. Of course, it wouldn't turn out like that. The fantastic never materialized in his line of business. There would be some drab solution that had been embroidered by overheated imaginations and the usual hysteria of the Chinese. Automatically, another part of Strangway's mind took in the 3 blind men. They were tapping slowly toward him from the sidewalk. They were about 20 yards away. He calculated that they would pass him a second or 2 before he reached his car. Out of shame for his own health and gratitude for it, Strangways felt for a coin. He ran his thumbnail down its edge to make sure it was a florin and not a penny. He took it out. He was parallel with the beggars. How odd! They were all Chigros. How very odd! Strangways' hand went out. The coin clanged in the tin cup. "Bless you, master," said the leading man. "Bless you," echoed the other 2. The car key was in Strangways' hand. Vaguely he registered the moment of silence as the tapping of the white sticks ceased. It was too late. As Strangways had passed the last man, all 3 had swiveled. The back 2 had found out a step to have a clear field of fire. 3 revolvers, ungainly with their sausage-shaped silencers, whipped out of holsters concealed among the rags. With disciplined precision, the 3 men aimed at different points down Strangways' spine. One between the shoulders, one in the small of the back, one at the pelvis. The 3 heavy coughs were almost won. Strangways' body was hurled forward as if it had been kicked. It lay absolutely still in the small puff of dust from the sidewalk.
Oh, well, I'll perhaps seems a good juncture. It was 6:17. With a squeal of tyres, a dingy motor hearse with black flumes flying from the 4 corners of its roof took the T intersection into Richmond Road and shot down towards the group on the pavement. The 3 men had just had time to pick up Strangways' body when the hearse slid to a stop abreast of them. The double doors at the back were open. So was the plain deal coffin inside. The 3 men manhandled the body through the doors and into the coffin. They climbed in. The lid was put on and the doors pulled shut. The 3 Negroes sat down on 3 of the 4 little seats at the corners of the coffin and unhurriedly laid their white sticks beside them. Roomy black alpaca coats hung over the backs of the seats. They put the coats on over their rags. Then they took off their baseball caps and reached down to the floor and picked up black top hats and put them on their heads. The driver, who was also a Chinese Negro, looked nervously over his shoulders. "Go, man, go," said the biggest of the killers. He glanced down at the luminous dial of his watch. It said 6:20. Just 3 minutes for the job, dead on time. The hearse made a decorous U-turn and moved at a sedate speed up to the intersection. There it turned right, and at 30 miles an hour, it cruised genteelly up the tarmac highway towards the hills, its black plumes streaming the doleful signal of its burden, and the three mourners sitting bolt upright with their arms crossed respectfully over their hearts. WXN calling WWW. WXN calling WWW. WXN, WXN, WXN. The center finger of Mary Trueblood's right hand stabbed softly, elegantly at the key. She lifted her left wrist. 6:28. He was a minute late. Mary Trueblood smiled at the thought of the little open sunbeam tearing up the road towards her. Now, in a second, she would hear the quick step, then the key in the lock, and he would be sitting beside her. There would be the apologetic smile as he reached for the earphones. "Sorry, Mary, damned car wouldn't start." Or, "You think the blasted police knew my number by now? Stop me at halfway tree." Mary Trueblood took the second pair of earphones off their hook and put them on his chair to save him half a second. WXN calling WWW. WXN calling WWW. She tuned the dial a hair's breadth and tried again. Her watch said 6:29. She began to worry. In a matter of seconds, London would be coming in. Suddenly, she thought, God, what could she do if Strangways wasn't on time? It was useless for her to acknowledge London, pretend she was him. Useless and dangerous. Radio security would be monitoring the call. As they monitored every call from an agent, those instruments which measured the minute peculiarities in an operator's fist would at once detect it wasn't Strangways at the key. Mary Trueblood had been shown the forest of dials in the quiet room on the top floor at headquarters, had watched as the dancing hands registered the weight of each pulse, the speed of each cipher group, the stumble over a particular key. The controller had explained it all to her when she had joined the Caribbean station 5 years before, how a buzzer would sound and the contact be automatically broken if the wrong operator had come on the air. It was the basic protection against a Secret Service transmitter falling into enemy hands. And if an agent had been captured and was being forced to contact London under torture, he had only to add a few hair-breadth peculiarities to his usual fist, and they would tell the story of his capture as clearly as if he had announced it en clair. Now it had come. Now she was hearing the hollowness in the ether that meant London was coming in. Mary Trueblood glanced at her watch. 6:30, panic. But now, at last, there were the footsteps in the hall. Thank God. In a second he would come in. She must protect him. Desperately, she decided to take a chance and keep the circuit open. WWW calling WXN. WWW calling WXN. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? London was coming over strong, searching for the Jamaica station. The footsteps were on the door, at the door. Coolly, confidently, she tapped back. Hear you loud and clear. Hear you loud and clear. Hear you. Behind her, there was an explosion. Something hit her on the ankle. She looked down. It was the lock of the door. Mary Trueblood swiveled sharply on her chair. A man stood in a doorway. It wasn't Strangways. It was a big Negro with a yellowish skin and slanting eyes. There was a gun in his hand. It ended in a thick black cylinder. Mary Trueblood opened her mouth to scream. The man smiled broadly. Slowly, lovingly, he lifted the gun and shot her 3 times in and around the left breast. The girl slumped sideways off her chair. The earphones slipped off her golden hair onto the floor. For perhaps a second, the tiny chirrup of London sounded out into the room. Then it stopped. The buzzer at the control desk in radio security had signaled that something was wrong on WXN. Or perhaps, Janine, you'd like to...
Killer walked out of the door. He came back carrying a box, excuse me, with a colored label on it that said Presto Fire, and a big sugar sack marked Tate and Lyle. He put the box down on the floor and went to the body and roughly forced the sack over the head and down to the ankles. The feet stuck out. He bent them and crammed them in. He dragged the bulky sack out into the hall and came back. In the corner of the room, the safe stood open as he had been told it would, and the cipher books had been taken out and laid on the desk ready for work on the London signals. The man threw these and all the papers in the safe into the center of the room. He tore down the curtains and added them to the pile. He topped it up with a couple of chairs. He opened the box of Presto firelighters and took out a handful and tucked them into the pile and lit them. Then he went out into the hall and lit similar bonfires in appropriate places. The tinder-dry furniture caught quickly, and the flames began to lick up the paneling. The man went to the front door and opened it. Through the hibiscus hedge, you could see the glint of a hearse. There was no noise except the zing of crickets and the soft tick-over of the car's engine. Up and down the road, there were no other signs of life. The man went back into the smoke-filled hall and easily shouldered the sack and came out again, leaving the door open to make a drop. He walked swiftly down the path to the road. The back doors of the hearse were open. He handed in the sack and watched the 2 men force it into the coffin on top of Strangway's body. Then he climbed in and shut the doors and sat down and put on his top hat. As the first flame showed in the upper windows of the bungalow, the hearse moved quietly from the sidewalk and went on its way upwards, the Mona Reservoir. There the weighted coffin would slip down into its 50-fathom grave, and in just 45 minutes, the personnel and records of the Caribbean station of the Secret Service would have been utterly destroyed.
Yeah, but I maybe continue. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Because this is going on to the second part here. At what date is this supposed to take place? Is this after the World War II or?
Yeah, I think so. I think these are sort of Cold War stories.
Of the Cold War. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're talking about sort of late 50s, early 60s. Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, they were contemporary with the writing. I mean, that's my perception. I mean, this was written in 58. So,
I was just going to say, and the reason I wondered is because of the lack of dialogue. There doesn't seem to be, now when you go to the writing program, show, don't tell. And yet this story is being told, third person omniscient, and there's really no dialogue in it. It's almost as though he plants other people's words to break up the monotony. Not that the story's monotonous, but that there's not hardly any dialogue. Is that usual for this time of writing?
Yeah, not the Bond I read has quite a lot of dialogue, I think.
I suppose it's yeah. I mean there were the odd remarks between the gamblers. I suppose it's marking. It was describing a passage of action which doesn't need dialogue to describe itself, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you've seen the film, there's very little dialogue at the beginning of the film up to the murder, and so it's the same. And normally,
I mean, isn't that characteristic, as far as I remember, of the films, that it
Yeah,
starts with a long
yes,
wordless action sequence and then the titles and the
yes, yeah,
music. So
yeah, yes, I think
maybe that
I
actually.
agree. I agree. Yeah.
Mm. I mean, that's a good observation, Janine. Yeah, maybe that is something which is typical of the books. I don't know that there is
Mhm.
this kind of setting of the stage by a
Well, I'm
by a.
wondering if other writers of the time do the same thing. Oh, I don't know how big his genre
Mm.
was at that time, where he fit into the other authors. If they all wrote like this, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of sort of Sapper and other Biggles books is that they had less of a cinematic quality. That the scene wasn't set like that in the third person. It was much more of sort of blokes talking with it. Do you agree,
That's a
Michael?
very interesting point. Yeah, I think you're suggesting that Ian Fleming might have had an eye to film rights, and W.E. Johns and Sapper did not. That may well be true. Actually, it's an
Yeah,
interesting point, isn't it? I don't know of any Biggles film at all now that you mention it.
yeah.
I suppose
They
there
didn't
must be
translate
some.
very
They
well. Yeah.
certainly couldn't have been very successful. I've never heard of them. That's a
and
very interesting point, isn't it?
and
Yeah.
there's I
Well,
don't think.
Sapper, for that matter, has
Yeah,
he
there's
been
no
made into films?
there's I can't think of. I mean, no,
No.
that's wrong. I think there were some black and white Bulldog Drummond
Mm.
films, but clearly they didn't uh mark themselves out as being so distinctive that they um
Yes, a very
originated a
interesting
tradition. Yeah,
point. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, maybe Ian Fleming. Yeah, I mean, he's as a writer, he did have a visual sense, and did like to describe things in this way, in a third person way
Mm.
without dialogue. Maybe that is, that's characteristic of him, really. Uh, yeah.
Okay,
Interesting.
number two, choice of weapons. 3 weeks
Okay.
later in London, March came in like a rattlesnake. For the first light on March 1st, hail and icy sleet, and with a force 8 gale behind them, lashed at the city and went on lashing as people streamed miserably to work, their legs whipped by wet hems of their mackintoshes and their faces blotching with the cold. It was a filthy day, and everybody said so. Even M, who rarely admitted the existence of weather, even if it in its extreme forms. When the old black silver wraith rolls with the nondescript number plate stopped outside the tall building in Regent's Park, and he climbed stiffly out on to the pavement, hail hit him in the face like a whiff of small shot. Instead of hurrying inside the building, he walked deliberately round the car to the window beside the chauffeur. Won't be needing the car again today, Smith. Take it away and go home. I'll use the tube this evening. No weather for driving a car, worse than one of those PQ convoys. Ex-leading stoker Smith grinned gratefully. Aye, aye, sir, and thanks. He watched the elderly erect figure walk round the bottom of the rolls and across the pavement and into the building. Just like the old boy, he always see the men right first. Smith clicked the gear lever into first and moved off, peering forward through the streaming widescreen screen. They didn't come like that anymore. M went up to the lift to the 8th floor and along the thick carpeted corridor of his office. He shut the door behind him, took off his overcoat and scarf and hung them behind the door, took out a large blue silk bandana handkerchief and brusquely wiped it over his face. It was odd, but he wouldn't have done this in front of the porters or the lift man. He went over to his desk and sat down and bent towards the intercom. He pressed a switch. I'm in, Miss Moneypenny. The signals, please, and anything else you've got. Then get me Sir James Maloney. He'll be doing his rounds at St. Mary's about now. Tell the chief of staff I'll see 007 in half an hour, and let me have Strangway's file. M waited for the metallic yes, sir, and released the switch. He sat back and reached for his pipe and began filling it thoughtfully. He didn't look up when the secretary came in with a sack of papers, and he even ignored the half-dozen pink most immediates on top of the signal file. If they'd been vital, he would have been calling during the night. A yellow light winked at the intercom. M picked up the black telephone from the row of 4. That you, Sir James? Have you got 5 minutes? 6 for you. At the other end of the line, the famous neurologist chuckled. Want me to certify one of Her Majesty's ministers? Not today, M frowned irritably. The old Navy had respected governments. It's about that man of mine you've been handling. We won't bother about the name. This is an open line. I gather you let him out yesterday. Is he fit for duty? There was a pause on the other end. Now the voice was professional, judicious. Physically, he's fit as a fiddle. Legs healed up, shouldn't be any after effects. Yes, he's all right. There was another pause. Just one thing, Em. There's a lot of tension there, you know. You work these men of yours pretty hard. Can you give him something easy to start with? From what you've told me, he's been having a tough time for some years now. Em said gruffly, that's what he's paid for. I'll soon show him if he's not up to the work. Won't be the first one that's cracked. From what you say, he sounds in perfectly good shape. It isn't as if he'd really been damaged like some of the patients I sent you, men who've been properly put through the mangle. Of course, if you put it like that, but pain's an odd thing. We know very little about it. You can't measure it. The difference in suffering between a woman having a baby and a man having a renal colic. And thanks God, the body seems to forget fairly quickly. But this man of yours has been in real pain. And don't think that just because nothing, excuse me, it's been broken. Quite. Bond had made a mistake, and he had suffered for it. In any case, M didn't like being lectured, even by one of the most famous doctors of the world, on how he should handle his agents. There had been a note of criticism in Sir James Maloney's voice. M said abruptly, ever hear of a man called Steinkron? Dr. Peter Steinkron? No, who's he? American doctor, written a book by my Washington people sent over for our library. This man talks about how much punishment the human body can put up with. Gives a list of the bits of the body an average man can do without. Matter of fact, I copied it out for future reference. Care to hear it? Care to hear the list? M dug into his coat pocket and put some letters and scraps of paper on the desk in front of him. With his left hand, he selected a piece of paper and unfolded it. He wasn't put out by the silence on the other end of the line. Hello, Sir James? Well, there they are. Gallbladder, spleen, tonsils, appendix, one of his 2 kidneys, one of his 2 lungs, 2 of his 4 or 5 quarts of blood, 2/5 of his liver, most of his stomach, 4 of his 23 feet of intestines, and half of his brain. M paused. When the silence continued at the other end, he said, any comments, Sir James? There was a reluctant grunt at the end of the telephone. I wonder he didn't add an arm and a leg, or all of them. I don't see quite what you're trying to prove. M gave a curt laugh. I'm not trying to prove anything, Sir James. It just struck me as an interesting list. All I'm trying to say is that my man seems to have got off pretty lightly compared with that sort of punishment. But M relented. Don't let's argue about it. He said in a milder voice, as a matter of fact, I did have it in mind to let him have a bit of a breather. Something's come up in Jamaica. M glanced at the streaming windows. It'll be more of a rest cure than anything. 2 of my people, a man and a girl, have gone off together, or that's what it looks like. Our friend can have a spell at being an inquiry agent. In the sunshine, too, how's that?
Michael, would you like to?
Yeah.
Right.
Just the ticket. I wouldn't mind the job myself on a day like this. But Sir James Maloney was determined to get his message through. He persisted mildly. Don't think I wanted to interfere, M, but there are limits to a man's courage. I know you have to treat these men as if they were expendable, but presumably you don't want them to crack at the wrong moment. This one I've had here is tough. I say you'll get plenty more work out of him. But you know what Moran has to say about courage in that book of his? Don't recall. He says that courage is a capital sum reduced by expenditure. I agree with him. All I'm trying to say is that this particular man seems to have been spending pretty hard since before the war. I wouldn't say he's overdrawn, not yet, but there are limits. Just so. M decided that was quite enough of that. Nowadays, softness was everywhere. That's why I'm sending him abroad, holiday in Jamaica. Don't worry, Sir James, I'll take care of him. By the way, did you ever discover what the stuff was that Russian woman put into him? Got the answer yesterday. Sir James Maloney also was glad the subject had been changed. The old man was as raw as the weather. Was there any chance that he had got his message across into what he described to himself as M's thick skull? Taken us 3 months. It was a bright chap at the School of Tropical Medicine who came up with it. The drug was fugo poison. The Japanese use it for committing suicide. It comes from the sex organs of the Japanese globefish.
So Bond, yeah.
Trust the Russians to use something no one's ever heard of. They might just as well have used curare. It has much the same effect, paralysis of the central nervous system. Fugo's scientific name is tetrodotoxin. It's terrible stuff and very quick. One shot of it like your man got, and in a matter of seconds the motor and respiratory muscles are paralyzed. At first the chap sees double, and then he can't keep his eyes open. Next he can't swallow, his head falls and he can't raise it, dies of respiratory paralysis. Lucky he got away with it. Miracle. Thanks entirely to that Frenchman who was with him. Got your man on the floor and gave him artificial respiration as if he was drowning. Somehow kept his lungs going until the doctor came. Luckily the doctor had worked in South America, diagnosed curare and treated him accordingly. But it was a chance in a million. By the same token, what happened to the Russian woman? M said shortly, "Oh, she died." Well, many thanks, Sir James, and don't worry about your patient. I'll see he has an easy time of it. Goodbye. M hung up. His face was cold and blank. He pulled over the signal file and went quickly through it. On some of the signals, he scribbled a comment. Occasionally, he made a brief telephone call to one of the sections. When he had finished, he tossed the pile into his out basket and reached for his pipe and the tobacco jar made out of the base of a 14-pounder shell. Nothing remained in front of him except a buff folder marked with the top secret red star. Across the center of the folder was written in block capitals, Caribbean Station, and underneath, in italics, Strangways and True Blood. A light winked on the intercom. M pressed down the switch. Yes? 007's here, sir. Send him in. And tell the armourer to come up in 5 minutes. M sat back. He put his pipe in his mouth and set a match to it. Through the smoke, he watched the door to his secretary's office. His eyes were very bright and watchful. James Bond came through the door and shut it behind him. He walked over to the chair across the desk from M and sat down. Morning, 007. Good morning, sir. There was silence in the room, except for the rasping of M's pipe. It seemed to be taking a lot of matches to get it going. In the background, the fingernails of the sleet slashed against the 2 broad windows. It was all just as Bond had remembered it through the months of being shunted from hospital to hospital, the weeks of dreary convalescence, the hard work of getting his body back into shape. To him, this represented stepping back into life. Sitting here in this room opposite M was the symbol of normality he had longed for. He looked across through the smoke clouds into the shrewd grey eyes. They were watching him. What was coming? A post-mortem on the shambles which had been his last case? A curt relegation to one of the home sections for a spell of desk work? Or some splendid new assignment M had been keeping on ice while waiting for Bond to get back to duty? M threw the box of matches down on the red leather desk. He leant back and clasped his hands behind his head. How do you feel? Glad to be back? Very glad, sir, and I feel fine. Any final thoughts about your last case? Haven't bothered you with it till you got well. You heard I ordered an inquiry. I believe the Chief of Staff took some evidence from you. Anything to add? M's voice was businesslike, cold. Bond didn't like it. Something unpleasant was coming. He said, No, sir, it was a mess. I blame myself for letting that woman get me. Shouldn't have happened. M took his hands from behind his neck and slowly leant forward and placed them flat on the desk in front of him. His eyes were hard. Just so. The voice was velvet, dangerous. Your gun got stuck, if I recall. This Beretta of yours with the silencer. Something wrong there, 007. Can't afford that sort of mistake if you're to carry an 00 number. Would you prefer to drop it and go back to normal duties? Bond stiffened. His eyes looked resentfully into M's. The license to kill for the Secret Service, the 00 prefix, was a great honor. It had been earned hardly. It brought Bond the only assignment he enjoyed, the dangerous ones. No, I wouldn't, sir. Then we'll have to change your equipment. That was one of the findings of the Court of Inquiry. I agree with it. Do you understand? Bond said obstinately, I'm used to that gun, sir. I like working with it. What happened could have happened to anyone, with any kind of gun. I don't agree, nor did the Court of Inquiry, so that's final. The only question is what you're to use instead. M bent forward to the intercom. Is the armourer there? Send him in. M sat back. You may not know it, 007, but Major Boothroyd's the greatest small arms expert in the world. He wouldn't be here if he wasn't. We'll hear what he has to say. The door opened. A short, slim man with sandy hair came in and walked over to the desk and stood beside Bond's chair. Bond looked up into his face. He hadn't often seen the man before, but he remembered the very wide apart, clear grey eyes that never seemed to flicker. With a non-committal glance down at Bond, the man stood relaxed, looking across at M. He said, "Good morning, sir," in a flat, unemotional voice. Morning, armourer. Now I want to ask you some questions. M's voice was casual. First of all, what do you think of the Beretta, the .25? Ladies' gun, sir. M raised ironic eyebrows at Bond. Bond smiled thinly. Really? And why do you say that? No stopping power, sir, but it's easy to operate. A bit fancy looking too, if you know what I mean, sir. Appeals to the ladies. How would it be with a silencer? Still less stopping power, sir, and I don't like silencers. They're heavy and get stuck in your clothing when you're in a hurry. I wouldn't recommend anyone to try a combination like that, sir. Not if they were meaning business. M smiled pleasantly to Bond. Any comment, 007? Bond shrugged his shoulders. I don't agree. I've used the .25 Beretta for 15 years, never had a stoppage, and I haven't missed with it yet. Not a bad record for a gun. It just happens that I'm used to it, and I can point it straight. I've used bigger guns when I've had to. The .45 Colt with the long barrel, for instance, but for close-up work and concealment, I like the Beretta. Bond paused. He felt he should give way somewhere. I'd agree about the silencer, sir. They're a nuisance, but sometimes you have to use them. We've seen what happens when you do, said M dryly. And as for changing your gun, it's only a question of practice. You'll soon get the feel of a new one. M allowed a trace of sympathy to enter his voice. Sorry, 007, but I've decided. Just stand up a moment. I want the armourer to get a look at your build. Bond stood up and faced the other man. There was no warmth in the two pairs of eyes. Bond showed irritation. Major Boothroyd's were indifferent, clinical. He walked round Bond. He said, "Excuse me," and felt Bond's biceps and forearms. He came back in front of him and said, "Might I see your gun?" Bond's hand went slowly into his coat. He handed over the taped Beretta with the sawn barrel. Boothroyd examined the gun and weighed it in his hand. He put it down on the desk. "And your holster?" Bond took off his coat and slipped off the chamois leather holster and harness. He put his coat on again. With a glance at the lips of the holster, perhaps to see if they showed traces of snagging, Boothroyd tossed the holster down beside the gun with a motion that sneered. He looked across at M. "I think we can do better than this, sir." It was the sort of voice Bond's first expensive tailor had used. Bond sat down. He just stopped himself gazing rudely at the ceiling. Instead, he looked impassively across at M. "Well, armourer, what do you recommend?" Major Boothroyd put on the expert's voice. "As a matter of fact, sir," he said modestly, "I've just been testing most of the small automatics. 5,000 rounds each at 25 yards. Of all of them, I'd choose the Walter PPK 7.65 millimeters. It only came fourth after the Japanese M14, the Russian Tokarev, and the Sauer M38. But I like its light trigger pull, and the extension spur of the magazine gives a grip that should suit 007. It's a real stopping gun. Of course, it's about a .32 caliber as compared to the Beretta's .25, but I wouldn't recommend anything lighter. And you can get ammunition for the Walter anywhere in the world. That gives it an edge on the Japanese and the Russian guns. M turned to Bond. Any comments? It's a good gun, sir, Bond admitted, but more bulky than the Beretta. How does the armourer suggest I carry it?
Shall I carry on? Burns Martin triple draw holster, said Major Bruce Hoyt succinctly. Best worn inside the trouser band to the left, but it's all right below the shoulder. Stiff saddle leather. Holds the gun in with a spring. Should make for a quicker draw than that. He gestured towards the desk. 3/5 of a second to hit a man at 20 feet would be about right. That's settled then. M's voice was final. And what about something bigger? There's only one gun for that, sir, said Major Boothroyd stolidly. Smith and Wesson Centennial Air Weight, revolver .38 caliber. Hammerless, so it won't catch in clothing. Overall length of 6.5 inches, and it only weighs 13 ounces. To keep the weight down, the cylinder holds only 5 cartridges. But by the time they're gone, Major Boothroyd allowed himself a wintry smile. Somebody's been killed. Fires the .38 S and W special. Very accurate cartridge indeed. With standard loading, it has a muzzle velocity of 860 feet per second, a muzzle energy of 260 foot-pounds. There are various barrel lengths, 3.5 inch, 5 inch. All right. M's voice was testy. Take it as read. If you say it's the best, I'll believe you. So it's the Walter and the Smith & Wesson. Send up one of each to 007 with the harness and arrange for him to fire them in. Starting today. He's got to be expert in a week, all right? Then thank you very much, Armourer. I won't detain you. Thank you, sir, said Major Boothroyd. He turned and marched stiffly out of the room. There was a moment's silence. The sleet tore at the windows. M swiveled his chair and watched the streaming panes. Bond took the opportunity to glance at his watch. 10 o'clock. His eyes slid to the gun and holster on the desk. He thought of his 15 years' marriage to the ugly bit of metal. He remembered the times its single word had saved his life, and the times when its threat alone had been enough. He thought of the days when he had literally dressed to kill, when he had dismantled the gun and oiled it and packed the bullets carefully into the spring-loaded magazine and tried the action once or twice, pumping the cartridges out onto the bedspread in some hotel bedroom somewhere around the world. Then the last wipe of a dry rag and the gun into the little holster, and a pause in front of the mirror to see that nothing showed. And then out of the door and on his way to the rendezvous that was to end with either darkness or light. How many times had it saved his life? How many death sentences had it signed? Bond felt unreasonably sad. How could one have such ties with an inanimate object, an ugly one at that, and he had to admit it, with a weapon that was not in the same class as the ones chosen by the armourer? But he had the ties, and M was going to cut them. M swiveled back to face him. Sorry, James, he said. There was no sympathy in his voice. I know how you like that bit of iron, but I'm afraid it's got to go. Never give a weapon a second chance, any more than the man. I can't afford to gamble with the 00 section. They've got to be properly equipped. You understand that? A gun's more important than a hand or foot in your job. Bond smiled thinly. I know, sir. I shan't argue. I'm just sorry to see it go. All right, then. We'll say no more about it. Now I've got some more news for you. There's a job come up in Jamaica. Personnel problem. Or that's what it looks like. Routine investigation and report. the sunshine will do you good, and you can practice your new guns on the turtles or whatever they have down there. You can do it with a bit of a holiday. Like to take it on? Bond thought. He's got it in for me over the last job. Feels I let him down. Won't trust me with anything tough. Wants to see. Oh, well, he said. Sounds rather like the soft life, sir. I've had almost too much of that lately. But if it's got to be done, if you say so, sir, yes, then I say so. Oh, good. I think that seems a good
Yeah.
place to stop. And I'm very impressed. I think the writing is very easy to read, nicely constructed sentences. The yeah, choice of words is sort of sparse and yeah, such as to give the pace, give a good pace to the narrative, and lots of well observed points. So yeah, I found that very good. It was much better than I thought that I was expecting. I was expecting something not with that polish or sort of yeah, it's kind of style really. Yeah, it has a sort of elegant strength about it. Your views, either of you?
Yeah. So the first thing is I would definitely say it reads to me far better than the You Only Live Twice, which I thought was really quite bad. And that
Oh,
is
really? Oh,
another
it's
interesting point that's
interesting.
come
Yeah.
up. Unless it's different when one reads, but I don't think so. Um, I I mean, I agree with you up to a point. I still expect far more from books that have had such success as films. I still think that I definitely don't like him as a writer, but I
Oh,
do
really?
agree. Oh no, I mean, first of all, this
Mm.
sadism that runs through. I think very
Yeah.
interesting is
Yeah.
that there were two things in the films that I had assumed quite wrongly, had been introduced by the
Yeah.
film
Tubby broccoli or
directors
whatever.
as
Yeah. Yeah.
titillation. And
Yeah.
I told a lot of people that in my ignorance, not having read the books.
Mm.
And I must apologize to all these film directors or whatever, however many there were of the
Mm.
Bond films.
Mm.
No, the sadism is there in the books. Absolutely. That's one point.
Mm. Mm.
Um, the the other kind of point I don't like about him is, and you see it with this gun, he goes into loving technical detail about what interests him. And that is absolutely true of the book that I've read and the little bit of Goldfinger.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, well, if I mean, are you really sure that all your readers are so interested in guns, are so interested in golf? I mean, yes, I understand. Of course, writers do it, but he does it really to excess, in my opinion. But another thing that struck me as fascinating is that if
I
you
mean,
see,
is that a defect? I mean, isn't it just the fact that you
it
don't
depends how
share
you
those
see it.
interests? I mean, if you,
I think to me he comes across as a club bore. And I think that's probably what he was in real life, I suspect. He gets you in a corner with a whiskey and he starts talking about golf or his experiences in Jamaica. And he's not interested in what you've got to say. He's just going to fill you with his interest. He comes over to me as a very unattractive person, and I very seldom feel that. I can about three or four writers where I could say I don't think I'd like them as people. That's very, very few. But one other big difference is that the films are action-packed, and no joke, You Only Live Twice. There is no action at all for the first 100 of 260 pages. I mean, no action. There is obviously, again, in this example, is a difference because there's a murder right at the beginning. So that's interesting. But the amount of action in the films compared to the lack of action in the books, I think is astonishing. So those are my comments. I would also compare them a little bit with Jean Le Carré, who I also don't particularly like as a writer, to be honest, but he convinces me much more in terms of spying and the world of spies. I don't know very much about the world of spies, but
no.
just John Le Carré convinces me. and Ian
Mm.
Fleming doesn't, that this is somehow what it was like.
Mm.
I just saw, partly actually related to Soteria, I saw Deadly Affair. Now, you don't like films, Stead?
I haven't
Okay,
watched
so
the film for a long time, but is this a recent film or?
no, it was. Do you know it, Janine? Deadly Affair? Janine?
You're on mute, Janine. On mute. Unmute yourself, please.
I've been coughing. Is it a movie that they're streaming, or is it a theater?
Oh no,
movie?
no. So it's a film from I think 1967.
Oh right.
okay,
Oh right.
so
Oh,
Yeah. It's
okay,
very,
so
very well known.
midstream,
It was
okay.
a Sidney Lumet film.
And who's in it? Who's in it?
James Mason,
oh right.
Lynn
Okay.
Redgrave had a very small role. Harry Andrews,
Okay.
Simonas Signore.
Give me a tagline on it. What?
Uh,
Because if James Mason's in it, I've probably seen it.
Oh, well, it's about it's a spy story, and James Mason is an official for MI5 who investigates a suicide, which becomes suspiciously not like a suicide of a person he had to investigate as being a suspect Russian mole.
Is this the one where he goes and visits the guy's wife?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Good.
That's good.
And what were you saying about the
Well,
film?
it comes across to me, that film, and certainly if you compare it with the Bond films, but I think John le Carre's books, because it's based on a book by le Carre, I think it's called Call for the Dead or something. The book had another title, but the films most obviously, but I think the books too, but certainly the films come over to me as much more a realistic portrayal. I just feel that instinctively, not with any expert knowledge.
Yeah.
This is what maybe it was like. I mean, okay, I do have a little knowledge because of my parents were involved, as I probably in military intelligence. But it came across to me as somehow much more convincing. And that film came across to me as very convincing, perhaps a bit exaggerated with the shooting at the end and so on, but somehow this could really be true. Okay, so that was yeah. But yeah, absolutely. The reading of this reads much better to me than the beginning of You Only Live Twice, where he goes into long details about Japanese customs and obviously relishes possibilities of Japanese tortures and the way they eat animals alive, and it makes a big joke of that. And I find the whole thing quite disagreeable.
I think you're not the only person to speak about that, about the an implicit sadism that runs through it. Yeah,
and it's in the films, and I think a lot of people think it's just the films, and being nasty about the film directors. There's one other thing. I was said to my wife about a month ago, and I want to take it all back. I watched the who's the last Bond? That Welshman, I've forgotten his name. Oh God.
Daniel Craig? No.
Yeah, that's right, Daniel Craig. Very full of a really horrible film. I don't want to watch any more with him, but very heavily laden with his trauma. And I was saying to my wife, this is typical of this. Everything today has to be filled with a person's trauma and his childhood misery and everything. Well, it's full of trauma. Bond is completely traumatized in You Only Live Twice. His wife's been killed. He's drinking far too much. He has hangovers, and he's a pretty miserable person. Completely different from the hero produced in the films. Really extraordinary. So, yeah, I had to say all that because I thought there's a lot to say. It's really quite interesting.
What did you think of the quality of the prose in the extract we've read today, which I thought was of good quality? What, Michael? Did not think
much higher again than You Only Live Twice. So this is kind of interesting, and I suppose I will be reading more to see which is typical.
It might be the case that he had different editors for his books. Going through the editing process, there's a lot of this stuff that could be cut out. It's way too slow. in terms
Yes,
of.
indeed. I agree. I think
And
it's like
here's
a,
what's
yeah.
really interesting, though.
Mm,
I took a class on writing military sci-fi. I found the military stuff, but sci-fi. But I went on and took it, and I did notice that the military men, because we had 3 women and 3 men in the group, the men get bogged down in detail. When they write
yeah.
stories, it's about the technical, I mean, here he gives how long, 3/4 of a second or whatever it was,
Mhm,
kills
mhm.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Just the minutia, and they get bogged down in that. Whereas if you're when you're reading it, parts of it, it's moving well. You can get through it, and you got this picture in your mind, and the people walking, and you can move with the text. But then they get bogged down in the minutia. So I don't think it's just Mr. Fleming that has that habit. I think it's a characteristic of people who are so into the
Mm.
technology of whatever they do, whether it's computers or whether it's guns or whether it's
Mm.
battle, and they want to tell you every detail, and really you don't need it. You
That
really don't.
is an interesting point. I mean, Frederick Forsyth does that in the Third Protocol with the making of a. I almost sort of thought this guy is dangerous because he's telling you how to make a small atomic bomb. If you're a terrorist, you've got some of the stuff. You read Forsyth's Third Protocol, you get quite detailed instructions.
Well, and it
So
may be
you may have a point.
it may be that the audience for this material at the time, being so close to the war being
Mm.
over, that they would be used to that
Yeah.
lingo,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Yes,
a
yes,
lot of men are interested in technical specifications
But I
of guns
do,
yeah,
and cars. That men just are. They
yes,
like
yes,
that, So,
yes.
but it would make a difference then if you had a female editor or if you had a male editor.
mm.
It
Oh, yeah.
be sure
I,
they
I,
ask
The interesting point, the editor. I mean, one thing that struck me, I thought was a bit strange, and I was wondering if it was Ian Fleming or it was just bad typing or copy editing, is the use of onto as 2 words, which I've never. I mean, just I think in any school that would be marked with a
yeah,
red pencil, wouldn't it? It's
yeah.
a
I
preposition,
noticed
onto. Yeah,
onto,
into,
yeah.
why not onto?
yeah, it's 3 times, I think. But it's an interesting point about editing and so on. Yeah.
One other thing that's very interesting, I just watched a rerun of a Columbo uh,
Mhm.
episode, and they used the blowfish poison as well. So when you mentioned the fugu, I
Mm,
completely related to that. I thought that
Mm.
was very
yeah, yeah.
interesting, uh, incredibly interesting.
Mm, mm,
In terms of it being interesting reading, it is, because especially because I don't know exactly how
mm.
MA or MI5 or whatever, MI6 or whatever, the inner workings of it. Um, but I can see a touch of humor in this guy.
Oh yeah, there is a
I mean,
humor
he's
that. Yeah.
very, it's understated, but you can,
Mm.
like the body parts that you can do without. I mean, come on, it's an exhaustive
Mm,
list.
mm.
Uh,
I,
but now we know, so.
I think that the characteristic mentioned in the Bond bedside companion does seem to be borne out by the extract. In that the 2 chapters did seem to nicely finish at a point where one was interested in continuing to read. So I
Mm.
thought that was good. Yeah, they were well shaped. So yeah,
And there must be something. Yeah, I am curious to read more of the books because I still think there must be something that is eluding me that has succeeded in spawning these films that are so successful, not only the
yeah.
films as films and the character of James Bond and Bullwinkle, but I mean, Bullwinkle and James Bond and M are iconic. And also, every film having this theme tune is, I mean, you may say, oh, that's, well, so what? But it's sort of fascinating that every film is associated almost with a very successful theme song that has become famous.
True, true.
And that is extraordinary in itself. And there must be something in the books that manages to inspire that in some way.
But remember, Mike, when you're making a movie, all that stuff about the minutia is gone. It's all visual.
Yes, that's true. It's not really in the films, is it?
And,
Yes.
You don't have it. In other words, you're viewing it in a pacing from a production standpoint, as opposed to actually reading line by line, word by word, whatever. So, I mean, the thing about the Bond movies, and let's be honest, we haven't gotten to the part yet where he's with this beautiful woman. The thing about the Bond movies was there was always a Bond girl. And immediately you had, he had these, whether she's villainous or whether she's love interest, there's always that male-female relationship. And what we read today, I can't see any woman being interested in this.
Oh, well, yeah, be patient. It's only chapter 2.
Well, I think, Judy, you're speaking.
I mean, oh my God. But on the screen, they literally come alive. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, another point. I mean, the point about the women and the action, the films appeal to a much more kind of childish audience, I think, than the books.
Yeah.
And the films have, I mean, I'll give you a very concrete example here in You Only Live Twice. James Bond is not in bed with any woman on page 1. And in the first film, as it reminds you, Sean Connery is in bed with this Japanese girl. That's the opening of the film. And then he gets out of the bed and then the bed swings up automatically and she lets in the gangsters and they all machine gun the bed. And then M or somebody appears and says, well, he died on the job, and somehow he doesn't die. There's nothing like that in the book. But also there's no detailed study of guns, is there? I mean, the film's just, it's at the level of sort of 6-year-olds. It's sort of, look at this, and it goes bang, and it's all rather exciting, but there's no detail. And here, these are adults discussing the fine points of armory.
Did you need just from an American perspective? Is there an equivalent to the James Bond genre for Americans?
Well, I was just going to say the TV series, and I can't remember the name of it now, but they kind of make a parody of the Bond character. And every episode, it begins with him going to the spy guy, going in and getting some fantastic kind of weapon that's goofy, right? And being told that his contact and the guy lives in a mailbox, and it's,
So I mean, in the sense of someone that seems to represent something about the nation, a kind of defender of the interests of the country in some heroic way, as James Bond is. I mean, I'm not aware of any.
Well, he's not an actor. Our people are action heroes, as opposed to kind of like the methodical, like you have to be for a spy. Now, there was a series, and Michael, I don't know if you've seen it, The Americans, about the spies, the communist spies here in America, and all the things they go through, and the ruses that they use to get information. And that comes closest to what the American audience really likes. But once again, it's about, it includes the family and the children, and
there's not one person, is there? It's not this one person.
I'm not aware, but then I don't read a lot of spy.
I mean, in this country, there is something called there's a series of films or programs on television called Doctor Who. I don't know whether you're familiar with those.
My daughter's a big fan.
I
I
mean,
know
in
the
that
premise.
case, that there is also a continual reincarnation of him, and then people will say, "Oh, yes, he's not a good Doctor Who, or he's
Yes,
not a
yes,
good,
that's
you
very
know."
true,
Right,
isn't it?
right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in that way, I think, I mean, James Bond does have a unique status, really, as a sort of, yeah, it's kind of semi-deified kind of ideal of sort of the man defending the country. But
Well, don't forget that at the time that this is being written, now that I know what time it is, coincides with the development of this idea of you've heard of the Rat Pack, this kind of smooth, cool, uh, unemotional but very sexual guy, whether he's a singer or he's a spy or it really doesn't matter. They all have this kind of sophistication, right? And so I'm amazed at what we've read that this man does not even seem anywhere near the movie character in terms of
Yes,
sophistication.
absolutely.
They've
But he
mentioned
hasn't had much choice. I mean, he's just gone into an office. I mean, give him a bit of
No, I agree with Janine.
space,
Absolutely,
give him a bit of
I've
space.
had no, because this is the point about the trauma and everything. The character in the books, I mean, which we just read, he's just undergone horrific torture, and Ian Fleming, the expert, whatever his name, doctor, is warning M that this torture have a psychological effect. Bond is a man who's suffered. I don't see Sean Connery appearing as a man who's suffered.
No,
I don't
no.
see Sean Connery as
well-dressed,
suffering.
well-tailored, and
Unless so
little-
Roger Moore, yeah.
Well, they did with that one Bond film, which is with John Lazenby, which was absolutely terrible, with Terry Savalas, who's famous, of course, for the Lollipop Man as Kojak. And I thought that was a really terrible film, but it did at least, it showed Bond, of course, at the end, if you've seen the film, he's just slumped over the Aston Martin, completely broken man. It's 100,000 miles from Sean Connery. And I think that everybody was so shocked that they then went to Roger Moore to have something more of a sort of connection. It was a break, wasn't it? I think it was between Sean Connery and Roger Moore. And but that at least was paying a bit of a tribute to the reality of the books, which seems to me that Bond, I mean, I never thought of Bond as having a hangover. Sean Connery doesn't have hangovers. Bond has such a hangover, and he's really, in most of this book, You Only Live Twice, he's actually quite sort of clumsy, and he makes mistakes, and the Japanese person kind of, I mean, on his side from the Japanese Secret Service, sort of sneers at him a bit. And he only sort of redeems himself when he the final point where a bit of action, real action, comes when he kills this man on a motorbike, which is written very badly, I think, because you have to read it twice to see that the man's been killed on the motorbike. So yeah, I agree with Janine. I mean, there seems to me to be a complete gap. I mean, this slick, cool type is personified in the films, but I don't see him in the books so far. I mean, of course, I'm speaking as a person who's read one book. You haven't read one of them. We just read that passage.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely curious enough. I'll report back. I shall read a couple more. I've got, I think, 4 or 5 of them.
I don't think he does justice to the Bond character. It's his character. Mr. Fleming created him, but he doesn't seem to do justice to what Bond became, an icon. And when you read this, you don't see icon. You see probably more realistic, actually. If he's having emotional problems,
Yes.
good for him. At least he's not, this psychopath. But it is kind
Well,
of
maybe read the next chapter to see what he does when he goes to Jamaica and on this assignment, and then, yeah, at the moment he's just been in an office looking at guns. So, I mean, it's available on PDF, so it's easily readable.
Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start from the beginning and watch all the Bond films, because there's a lot of them I haven't seen because Sean Connery was Bond, and then
But I mean, that is another phenomenon to which many people contributed. The musicians who composed the music, the cinematographers, the actors. So that is, yeah. I mean, that's a subject in itself. And I think today we were looking at the writing, and I can see why he's a well-regarded writer, and obviously we just looked at a small amount, but as I said, Michael, your criticisms are not, are not inconsistent, possibly with people who are not big fans of the writing. That was an enjoyable.
Yes, wasn't it?
Yeah, I
Interesting-
enjoyed that. Yeah.
Interesting subject, absolutely, yeah.
Fleming's a good writer. I mean,
So
if I didn't know anything about James Bond at all.
yes, yeah, that's how we've got to present it if we've never seen the
last
film.
interesting point is that, of course, Ian Fleming never had the chance to judge the film. I think he approved of the selection of Sean Connery, but didn't he die just before?
I think he died in 1964 or something like
months
that.
before the first film.
Something like that. Yeah, I could imagine it. So
would have been interesting to have
yeah.
heard his comments, but maybe he would have had to be polite or something, or diplomatic.
Well, he had, his credentials were pretty good. I read over his life, and he seems to have been adequately emotionally traumatized as a child. So
Yes.
he write about that very well.
So perhaps the next meeting we can read something of yours, Janine.
Yeah, well, I sent you 3, and I got your email, and I understand what you're saying about not pre-reading.
I'm not going to like read it and say because the purpose for me of these meetings is to have time to read something with other people and read it fresh. So
right.
So okay, that's good. So we can maybe.
But the thing is how we're dealing with spies. I think that the second one I sent you, Red's Not Your Color, what red meaning communism, of course. I think that probably would be the best story to read.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We
They're
can do that.
very short, by the way.
Right. Oh well, we can have a couple and read them. I think that's good. Maybe any Sunday's not good. Any Sunday's not good for you.
And anytime is good for me.
Okay.
As long as I can figure out the time.
November. I can't think of any Sunday particularly. So leave it to you, Michael, to propose a date and get back to me.
I'll send you a suggestion. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's good.
Well, AJ did sort of intimate that he'd be happier with an hour earlier. It seems to be, but
he has to leave at a certain time.
There's something, a little bit like this to the messages in the book.
I don't know whether that's every week or just today. I don't know.
No, where he was saying before you came that there's a fixed time. It was a bit like from the novel, there's a fixed time, very exact, and so he has to.
In that, I mean, AJ has been a regular attendee, and therefore that carries weight. And maybe we should think about other options because I can't get here any earlier, I'm quite. It's the end of a long working day, and I don't get to. So I'm not.
Is Sunday the only day everybody has free? I mean,
no. I mean, it could be maybe another day.
Really.
I maybe another day might be a possibility if it would mean AJ could attend. But let's consider maybe other options because with the changing of times, it might be good to have an earlier time on another day so that AJ can attend and maybe other people. So it's okay. Let's keep that alive.
A possibility. Communicate. I'm relatively flexible myself. So
we could do. We could do that. All right then. Thanks very much for being the sole representative of.
I was really looking forward to this.
I was actually, and it's been enjoyable. I've not been disappointed, so that's good. That's good. All right, thanks to you both. Have a good for what remains of the Sunday, and we'll see us again in a few weeks' time, I hope.
Yeah.
All right then.
Sounds
thanks.
Good.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.